At the time of sunrise, a ray grazes the notch on the left side on Christmas Day, a feast day of the church, the first season of the Christian year, the season of the blessed advent of the Savior, Lord Christ. Salvatorus Domine Christi, behold, he is born of Mary, a woman. All that remains. You know, in our quest for truth around this world, what an interesting place, and especially for this season, the conception of Yeshua Messiah, Jesus the Christ, that here we have a stone found in West Virginia, in Wyoming County, a petroglyph in pure ogam, that dates back to the year 600 AD. What a fascinating thing that travelers, Christians, were in this great nation in the year 600 AD, and that they would leave such a wonderful message. And this is not the only message left. We'll be covering another one, perhaps even this season next year, in the coming year. Probably one of the most interesting things about this particular petroglyph, you noted that it was translated by Dr. Barry Fell. Dr. Barry Fell has never been on this site. He was simply sent a copy of the ogam that is present on this stone and informed Dr. Pyle as well as others that this translation was no doubt the notch that was there that the sun would mark on December, or the date of Christmas, whichever you wish to say, that there would be a mark on this stone. We're going to still be working with this. Of course, you must understand that especially in the year 600 AD, that the Christians knew that Christ began to dwell with man at the day of conception. The documentation is the fact that Mary hasted after being approached by that angel, that the conception had taken place. She rushed to Elizabeth, her cousin, that same day. And as she approached Elizabeth with John the Baptist being an embryo of 6 months, an infant of 6 months in the womb, with the presence of Christ in the womb of a woman, Mary, as she approached, John leapt in the womb of Elizabeth, documenting that the Holy Spirit, that heavenly Spirit of Messiah, had begun to dwell with man at that time. But it is wonderful that Dr. Fell, on translating this, with the documentation being proved, that certainly that notch, that sign, does come to pass exactly as he made this translation. So you have basically a double witness within this, and I think that is fascinating, and certainly to the credit of Dr. Barry Fell, whom most of us consider to be the foremost translator of ancient languages. How exciting. And again, Dr. Barry Fell translating. And yep, you're there. All that remains as we dig the landsides, as we search the petroglyphs, as we read these signs, the stones that man has left us, that has gone on before, how precious, especially in this season, to know, hey, the Christians were here a long, long time ago We found evidence of this in Kensington, Minnesota. We have found it in many other places. You will find it in the Horse Creek Monument, which we will be doing at a later time, possibly even this time next year. But how exciting when we see the knowledge that was in this nation. It is strange. I hope if we ever accomplish any one thing, that this old feeling, well, they were just heathen. I tell you, they were not heathen. They were well educated, and they were adventurers, and they were scattered, and they were driven by the wonder of this world created by our Father. And here you have it. When the Holy Spirit began dwelling with man, fixed on a stone, 600 A.D. It is evident to the scholar that this message is Christian even before it was deciphered because of 3 Christian symbols of deity which appear at the site together with the ogam. The Christ sign, or the chiral sign, is comprised of a symbol formed from the 2 Greek letters that stand first in the name Christ. CH for the first letters of Christ, resembling an X, and the R resembling a P. The Wyoming County petroglyph, Chi-Rho sign, is a combination of the 2 letters and closely matches a version used on the coins of the Emperor Justine the First. Particularly Irish is the symbol called by scholars the incarnation initial, taken from the Lindisfarne Gospels, AD 700. It consists of a large chi, always introduced by the scribes at the beginning of the 18th verse of the 1st chapter of Matthew, where the apostle writes, "Now the birth of Christ was on this wise." The ogam inscriptions relates the birth of Christ, and then after stating that the child was born of Mary, the scribe inserts an ogam version of the incarnation initial. He has inserted some ogam strokes into the chi to make the word G-I-A-N, gain, meaning incarnation. The sign adjacent to the ogam inscription is 2 lines of script, not yet deciphered, but to many Irish scholars it is the sign of the dove, as used on many inscriptions in Ireland. In the upper line occurs the well-known symbol IHC, plus used by the Western Church as a monogram of the name of Jesus. The letters are the first 3 Greek letters, IES, in the name Isos, or Jesus. Here is a breakdown of the ogam inscription according to Dr. Barry Fell. There are 9 separate lines of script. Lines 1 through 6 are the ogam inscriptions, which translate into the reading given at the beginning of the program. 7 and 8 are the 2 piety signs we just went over. Line 9 is an added text which makes appropriate comment on the Old Irish text. We will not go into the translation of this line during this program. Now we will show you line by line how Dr. Fell deciphered lines 1 through 6. First, the ogam rebus, and with the English transliteration and then the English translation. This missionary of long ago made part of his work the sweat of his brow as he chiseled this petroglyph. May you receive a blessing from it as the blessing you receive when you walk up to this great monument, this stone. I'm sorry, it is not a national protected site. Therefore, it cannot be said where that it remains, because the only protection it has is the protection of secrecy, its location. It is a fascinating petroglyph, but it would seem that you can feel the presence of the Spirit there, that certainly the Holy Spirit smiled upon the missionary that brought this word, 600 AD. All that remains, pretty good chunk of it remained here. But in our quest, as we sift through space, through acres, through counties, through states, to find those things that do remain. And I know that you that are basically new in petroglyphs, in points, and things of this nature, you really need to acquire a copy of Dr. Pyle's work, his book, All That Remains. You'll have an opportunity to order that from the chapel. He is a teacher, and he has taught hundreds of young people to take an interest in what does remain, to look down and to look up, to look around, to see, to observe. And his students have done a great work in West Virginia as well as other places. Here you see an example of Robert Pyle's students, the discovery of a petroglyph in Marshall County, February 1988. Pictured Richard Berge, Doug Coulter, Jay Galloway, left to right. You know, when the youth of our nation can be trained and taught to see that remains, what a gifted man, Robert Pyle, that he passes this on to the young people. Here we have Dr. Pyle with members of the Irish Embassy. For you see, in Ireland itself, there are petroglyphs very similar to this. I look forward to this coming year that Robert Pyle and the Irish Embassy itself, we're arranging a documentary even in Ireland that we may share with you in the coming time. Yes, even those of the Irish Embassy travel to the States to see this petroglyph. So I highly recommend his work, for as a teacher, he brings it down where a layperson beginning in archaeology can learn a great lesson from this man. All That Remains, the title of this documentary and the title of his great book that will help people understand. It was a blessing to be at this place and to feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. How blessed it was.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're here in beautiful Western Virginia. Here in the mountains, a little bit foggy today, but I know you're going to enjoy what this gentleman's going to share with you. An archaeologist, and extraordinary, I think, because he's a teacher also. Therefore, this giving him the ability to express even to the layperson those facts that he documents, and also, I think you're going to find that he can carry a subject real well in helping us perhaps use our minds a little bit and try to understand what happened here long, long ago. Mr. Robert Pyle. Mr. Pyle, it's a pleasure being with you today.
We're located here in southern West Virginia at the what we know as the Wyoming County petroglyph. It's a cliff of stone that has some very unusual markings, some very unusual symbols that possibly could represent an ancient alphabet known as ogam. In Europe, throughout Scotland, and also Wales, are very similar marks as to what we have right here on the sandstone face. It's really been exciting in exploring southern West Virginia for evidence of early man as far back as 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. But I was really even more fascinated when I come across these markings here in southern West Virginia that do resemble an ancient alphabet known as ogam. Many of the symbols are Christian religious type symbols. This sets it apart from some of the Amerindian markings. A lot of times we find pictographs, which are carvings on stone that resemble animals, and birds. But when you have a site like this, a petroglyph site with distinct symbols, it just makes you wonder who really did make these, who really did carve them into the stone. I had noticed several other sites, especially throughout the southern part of West Virginia. And just exploring and talking with many of the people down here even further got my interest, and I've been coming down here for quite a few years. And through the assistance of Tony Shields, one of the local residents, has taken me very far into the mountains, and I believe that many of the mountain areas here have a lot of the answers to our early history, especially of West Virginia and hopefully North America. But who were the explorers? That's been a question that's been asked so many times, and again, a lot of times we may just not have the answers. But what we do look for is the archaeology, the evidence that show people had lived here, occupied this area for many years, centuries. And this is one of my involvements, is trying to find the evidence as an archaeologist, as to say, yes, these marks were made by early European explorers. They are very similar. What artifacts were left by these people? And again, you have to say, well, who were they? And one of the possibilities is that they may have been hermit priests. Around the 5th century AD, in Ireland especially, the priests were leaving because of temptation and unrest within the country. And one of the early documentations there in Ireland showed that they had set their sails, and they said that the Lord would blow them wherever He wanted them to be. And maybe, you know, that's possibly one answer. But again, we're looking at evidence. What evidence do we have? And again, that's been one of my major involvements since 1982. And I'm still searching, and I've been very fortunate in locating some very unusual artifacts, which we'll show and discuss later. But at this time, I thought we might go on up here to the actual site itself and take a look. Okay, this is the Wyoming County petroglyph, or what we call the Wyoming County petroglyph. It is. It has been documented at our Culture and History Center here in Charleston. When I first came here in 1981, I had marked it off into 2-meter squares. This is one of the things that I generally do when we're investigating or documenting the petroglyph site, whenever the area allows, is documenting it so that if any of the marks do change over a time period, that we'll be able to see how it was first actually documented. The Wyoming County petroglyph site is a very important site to me, and personally as well as professionally. One of my interests is trying to find the artifact evidences to support whether these are actual ogam marks, proving maybe what some of the symbols are. And I don't get in the role as a linguist as to try and interpret the markings as I find them. All I'm interested in at this time is to verify that they are of a very early time period, and trying to identify that time period to a culture. And at this time, the only thing that I can see that matches up with these marks are the marks that are found in Ireland, in Scotland, and again in Wales. There's quite a few sites in Scotland that produce not only the ogam marks, but as well as the Viking runes. And this is one of the things that I first considered when I came here, is that I thought, boy, these really look like runes because of the elongated line groupings. And then as I started looking at the natural weathering fractures within the stone here, and looking at the marks above and below these weather fractures, which would be normally referred to as stem lines in the identification of ogam. And one of the things that still differed from the actual ogam in this site is that the ogam are generally markings on tombstones on the corner edge of a stone. And the marks here are on a vertical face and not utilizing a corner edge. There's quite a few different symbols. One of these, for instance, this type of symbol here is called a Pyle, and this symbol down here, which isn't, you cannot see probably too well, it's not chalked out, but maybe you can highlight it, is also called a Pyle symbol, which this one has been identified as a possible Greek symbol, which stands for Christ, which is CH. And it's a very indented symbol. Is to say that whomever had carved these markings here, that if anything would last the elements, that they wanted to make sure that this symbol would outlast everything else. And I had early contact several different linguists throughout the United States as well as Europe. Dr. Pyle was a well-known linguist, and I had sent a lot of information to him, and in turn he would send his opinion back to me. And one of the things that really excited me was the fact that he was able to determine, without ever being here, without ever seeing the actual site, that this was a site that was astronomically aligned. And that means that at certain times of the year that the sun would shine on this site. A lot of times in man's early periods that they had to determine the seasons of the year, and so the winter solstice, the summer solstice were very important to them. I had mentioned earlier to the group that's here with me that why this particular site was chosen to have these marks applied to it, and because there's a lot of beautiful sandstone exposures throughout West Virginia, but maybe it's because the sun just does hit this site as they need it to have in order to be able to determine the season of the year. And this is what Dr. Pyle had mentioned, is that it was a winter solstice, which is the 21st of December, that the sun would gaze through a notch on the left-hand side. Well, Tony Shields, a very good friend and a local resident here, and I came down here. We were here before the 21st, and we did witness that the sun did shine through the left-hand notch, which is the upper section of the rock shelter here. This upper section here, on the 21st day of December. And it generally happens even 2 days before or 2 days after. And one of the things that impressed me was the fact that when the sunlight did come through this notch of the rock shoulder, it perfectly aligned with the 3 marks on the left-hand side of this symbol here that we refer to as a sunburst type symbol. And then as the sun got even higher, is that this shadow alignment from the rock shoulder would move very quickly across the face. And as I'm doing with this, using a straight edge would be better is to use, because as you can see that this edge of this stick would pretty well align every mark that's on here. And you can do this by projecting a slide of it onto a screen and taking a yardstick and using it as a straight edge and go right across. And you can see that whoever had planned this site didn't do it haphazardly. It's that they took their time, they planned this group of markings. And again, as you can see, that it does have a pretty uniform alignment. Kevin Dowling, Dick O'Brien, Charlie Vaughn from Washington, D.C. from the Irish Embassy was here in 1984. They were very interested in this site, as well as some of the other petroglyph sites that I have researched throughout West Virginia, because the markings do resemble what they have in their country. One of the statements that Kevin Dowling made to me here, he asked me, he said, "What do you recognize that symbol on the wall there beside you?" And I told him, I said, "Well, Kevin," I said, "I don't really identify the symbol, but I do identify that that symbol is the same age as the rest of the marks that are on the face of the stone here." He said, "Well, it was very similar to the symbol of the dove that was been recorded since around the 5th century A.D. in the archives in Dublin." And I asked him, I said, I told him I'd really like to have a copy of that information. It was about a year later, a professor from Canada had written to me and sent me photographs of 2 more symbols similar to what we have right here at the Wyoming County Petroglyph, a possible symbol of the dove. So one of the things that differentiates between Amerindian and maybe some of the earlier explorers is the fact that the petroglyph sites that I've been involved with have definite Christian religious symbols. And this is something that I don't know of yet that's been found at any pictograph site that has been identified as Amerindian. As I was mentioning earlier about the Amerindians, these are American Native Indians that have been documented in making various picture type carvings, picture type writing, sometimes referred to as rock art. The only thing that I've seen here that resembles maybe Amerindian are the 3 line figures, which are referred to as the turkey tracks. Some of the Algonquin Indians sites are known for the type of 3-line track. I think
This
it's
one up top here.
Yeah, what is that?
this one.
Yeah.
Okay, this I had originally marked it out in charcoal. I was very questionable of this symbol here. Someone else has been here since then and marked it out with chalk, but it didn't have the same weather texture as the rest of these earlier markings. And so whether someone had been here, which prior to me, but I doubt it at that time, because the site had been, I guess, left alone from 1950 until I was here in 1981. And the surface of the stone was covered with algae or lichen. And this symbol here did not have algae or lichen covering on it. And again, what I refer to as a sugar surface. This is when it's just like these markings here, the scratch marks here. These are all very recent. And when you've taken any object that's very hard, such as a knife blade or a coin or another stone, and you compress the sand grains of the formation, it reveals a sugar, what we refer to in geology as a sugar surface, indicating that this stone face has been recently marred or scarred. And again, that's what this symbol had. And so I was very questionable, although I considered maybe someone had went over this ancient mark. But I thought that I would have to leave that up to the linguists and to my future archaeological research of symbols and petroglyph markings. That's another area, is that in differentiating between pictographs and petroglyphs. Again, pictographs are generally your picture-type carvings or drawings on stone. Petroglyphs are generally are groups of markings, as you see here. Some of them may be very exotic, just like the sunburst here. Sometimes these are referred to as a rebus, meaning that it's a group of marks that represents a phrase or a message. And this is some of the things that we had noticed at the Horse Creek petroglyph, or the hand rebus. And again, at the Dingus site, which is about a 2-hour drive from Wyoming County here, that we have a major petroglyph there as well. And that was one of the things that was really interesting as well, was the fact that many of the petroglyphs, a total of 7 that I've been involved with, are close associated with Indian Ridge being the southernmost boundary of Wyoming County, West Virginia. This was a major trail or major thoroughfare for early explorers. And it stands to reason is that these petroglyphs were made by the people who were traveling Indian Ridge. And again, our question is, who were these early explorers? And as I was telling the group that's here with me, is that a lot of the answers to our questions about our early history is still here in the mountains of West Virginia, in Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. One of the areas that come to mind when I was first involved with petroglyphs was the Grave Creek Mound at Moundsville, Marshall County. Due to the Grave Creek tablet that was found there, and the mound is approximately around 1000 BC, which makes it about 3,000 years ago, is that they, during the excavation of in the early 1830s, 1940s, they had found this petroglyph tablet. Had some very unusual markings on it. Some of the text on the tablet was identified as Iberian. There's been a lot of controversy about it. I guess it's one of the most controversial artifacts in the state of West Virginia is the Grave Creek tablets. Some of the archaeological sites there at Moundsville, I thought if there was anything to the petroglyphs as far as being made by early Christian explorers from Europe, from especially from Ireland, from Scotland, that why isn't there more petroglyphs found in Marshall County, or why isn't there one found there? And I've been involved with students there for the last 7 years, and 3 of them had been out on the weekends after they finished their homework. They were out exploring, and during their time out, they discovered 13 new petroglyphs in Moundsville, and I have 9 of the 13 protected at our archive in Morgantown. And the symbols are very similar as to what we have found at especially the Beard's Fork site. The same type symbol found on stones in Marshall County and earlier at Beard's Fork. And to me it was really exciting is that here finally we do have a petroglyph near, right in Moundsville. And they're not all confined just to Indian Ridge, but Indian Ridge crosses the Ohio River, and Moundsville is right on the banks of the Ohio River. And knowing that the ridge tops in the major streams were, as I refer to them, as the interstate of prehistoric time, because these were the major travel ways for people. Because a lot of times people say, well, gee whiz, how did these early explorers get back into that country? It's even remote today. And the thing is, it tells me that most people that don't understand that has not really been out in the woods, and to see that you're not really confronted with secondary growth in these early times as you are today. But even today, with the secondary growth, is that on Indian Ridge, the trail is there. It's still there. It's still heavily traveled by various animals. And Tony Shields, myself had traveled along Indian Ridge and located several sites within like a site every 2 to 3 miles. And this is what I've been really involved with, is trying to find the evidence, searching for those answers. Some of the archaeological research outside of the petroglyphs and setting up a method of research was one of my goals in trying to figure out what would be the best approach in researching the Wyoming County petroglyph and any of them. And through the help of Arnold Hyde Jr. in Charleston, West Virginia, who had conducted these aerial infrared of the various archaeological sites throughout Wyoming County, Marshall County. This was a very valuable tool. Aerial infrared is a type of photography, and it's a type of special film that focuses in on heat absorbent areas. In other words, regardless of how long ago it's been that the soil has been disturbed, it will remain heat absorbent. So therefore, locating archaeological historic sites, aerial infrared is the main tool to apply. And I realized that in southern West Virginia, we were confronted with a lot of steep topography. So we were limited in the use of the infrared, but where we had applied it, this is one of the results. And a good example is this cornfield had not been plowed for a period of 2 years at the time this was taken. And you can easily see the furrow, in other words, you can see the way it was plowed. And within this area, most of the archaeological sites that we've found with the use of infrared show up with a charcoal type coloration. And sometimes it may not be an archaeological site. Sometimes it may be where a property owner has burnt fence posts. But after we have investigated a site area that we think that's a site, we go in and of course get permission and conduct a test hole. And this is generally about a 3-foot square hole. And this is again, this is at the Cook Farm in Wyoming County, which is approximately a quarter of a mile from the Wyoming County petroglyph. The results was we'd verified that this was an actual Indian camp. It's approximately 900 AD, based on the type of cord-marked pottery, which was shell-tempered. There was also a circular stone very similar to the token stone that I have mentioned in my book. The stone that I had found did not have any markings on it, but it was shaped and worked in the same manner as this early circular stone has been referred to by Dr. Pyle as a token, an ancient IOU. This is the actual site as to where it was found. And as we continue our research, and again with the assistance of Arnold Hyde Jr. in the excellent photographs, this is a newly discovered one, a newly discovered Indian site in Morgantown, Mungay County, West Virginia. And I don't know if you can see the circular outline, but this is an archaeological site. It's approximately 200 feet in diameter. And these circular sites were a type that is referred to as a stockade village. In other words, they had a wall of posts that encompassed the camp itself. And this is approximately about 900 AD also. After you've located a site with the aerial infrared, of course, to verify what you have found requires the field investigation. And the two display cases here are the results from the use of aerial infrared. We would go in and conduct the test units as to find out maybe it would have been a historic site, maybe the stain had resulted from some other activity other than early or primitive campsites. But this is the evidence that has shown up at many of these sites. And there are projectile points ranging from 10,000 to 1,000 AD represented here. Some very unusual bone artifacts, especially the tubular pipe here, some of the various bone needles. And the pendants were extremely interesting to me because of the unusual group of markings that are on some of them. The bone comb, of course the prongs have long decayed. These are the type of artifacts that could lead us to the answers about the petroglyphs, because some of the pendants have very similar marks as to what we find at petroglyph sites. They're very carefully arranged groups of markings. And as you can see on the outer edge of this one in particular, and this larger pendant, this group of pendants are made from what we call cannel coal. It's a very hard bone-like type coal. It doesn't burn very well, but it's excellent for carving. And the early Indians found that they could carve it, and it was very attractive. This is a very rare artifact. This is what is referred to as a death mask or bone death mask. And this was tied on the face of the individual at the time of burial. The bottom part here where I'm pointing was arched over the nose of the deceased. And I'm sure that the holes here were interlaced with some type of sinew, which is a type of thong or muscle from a deer that was used as strings or thongs or rope ties. And it has an unusual grouping of 5 perforations right here. And again, this type of organization of markings, maybe it's coincidental, I don't know, but it's rather unusual. It's like in some of the early cupstone discoveries. These cupstones are stones that have these cupules that have been carved or rubbed into the surface of the stone, and many of them take on various patterns. And I look for these similarities in bone and stone, and in association with my petroglyph work. The arrowheads or projectile points were very important to me as well, because knowing where the flint came from that was used in making them was extremely important. And one of the things that I had first considered was, if some of these early explorers had come from Europe, that they would have been very knowledgeable of the high grade or high quality flints. And it's like you see some of the black flints, some of the real colorful or exotic type colors here. This is the type of flints that I've seen from Europe. And again, by looking at the type of flint that was used for shaping the artifacts and where it came from, could help establish what type of long-distance trade existed in an area. I've even taken a little further in some of the experiments that I've conducted with flints and using ultraviolet lighting, looking at what we call reflective lighting. I can use an ultraviolet light on the various flints and look at the reflective lighting that's given off through the use of the ultraviolet light, can help identify, again, or positively identify the locality as to where this flint came from. And the reflective lighting, there is instruments that can measure the percentage of reflective lighting to even more so support the location of that flint. So the archaeological sites that are very close to the petroglyph sites may reveal the answers as to what we're looking for, as to the types of flints, the type of artifacts, the type of technology that the people had within the petroglyph areas. And these answers will come through the archaeological research and from the long life residents. This is one of the latest discoveries in West Virginia, one of the latest petroglyph discoveries in West Virginia. This was found by Mr. Storch up at Limestone, West Virginia. It's near Moundsville. Moundsville is in Marshall County. It's in the northern panhandle of West Virginia. This unusual stone has very similar marks to the ancient alphabet known as ogam. It does have a natural stem line, or not a natural stem line, a stem line that has been carved purposely in this face of this stone. And then, as you can see, this small group of marks above and below the stem line. And you can see there's a multiple grouping of various marks. This is some of the first limestone petroglyphs that I've had the pleasure of investigating. The Wyoming County petroglyph, the Horse Creek petroglyph, the Beard's Fork petroglyph, and a few others are all on sandstone. The 13 petroglyphs that was found by the group of students there in Marshall County are also on limestone. And the markings and the way they're grouped are, in my opinion, certainly not Amerindian. At least I don't know of any Amerindian sites that has produced markings that were systematic in the groups as shown in these petroglyph sites throughout West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia. This is the Hampshire County stone that was found in Hampshire County, West Virginia. This was found by Steve Bodkins from Morgantown. And it was on his father-in-law's farm there in Hampshire County. And knowing that I was interested in the petroglyphs and various other artifacts, Steve has often brought to my attention various sites and materials from those sites. But this particular one here really took my interest a lot, because it has groups of markings on the corner edge as those stones in Ireland, very similar to the same stones in Ireland. Most of the stones that have markings on the corner edge were actual tombstones, and the markings were the name of the person within the grave. And again, here is this stone that's found right here in West Virginia, with these very similar markings. Okay. This unusual artifact is what we refer to as a 5-line grid stone. And it is a stone with a pattern of a 5-line grid. This was found approximately, if you go by ridge top, from the Wyoming County petroglyph to Coal Mountain, West Virginia, you're looking at approximately 5 to 10 miles. And the markings on this stone are very similar as to what's found in Europe in the lintel areas of the sun-worshipping temples. Some of the sites that I have found petroglyphs indicate that some of them may have been early pagan sites. And this is the case especially at the Dingus petroglyph site, that many of the markings are similar to early paganism. But this stone here, again, was found very close to the Wyoming County petroglyph. This is also a very spectacular discovery, and this was found by Mr. Plachetti who lives at Marietta, Ohio. This is what I refer to as a tablet, and as you can see, it has a stem line that has apparently been rubbed. The stone is limestone. It's a carbonaceous type limestone that has some very similar markings as to the alphabet of ogam. The line or tree-like line groupings over on this side are very similar to what we refer to as a dyad tree ogam. And Dr. Fell's, one of his books, explains a little bit about this type of ogam. There's quite a variety or forms of ogam found throughout Europe, and this is our record to compare with North America, is what is in Europe, and then compare that to what we have in North America. It's sort of a process of elimination, is by looking at the various type markings and symbols and the way the markings are grouped in comparison to that record as early as possibly 300 AD in Ireland. One of the other things I didn't mention, I mentioned in my book about it, and that was the silver crosses that were found at 3 and 4 foot levels and I didn't mention this, but there was also gold and silver crucifixes found at in the mound there at Mary. And the copy of the report that I have is 1925, and it said crucifixes of an unknown god were found at certain levels within this mound at Mary.
I want you to know it's been a real pleasure doing this documentary here in West Virginia. West Virginia, where it has been documented. And a man spending 30 years of his own life, one person alone, and all the people he came in contact with that brought forward this story of prehistoric, I suppose we can use that term, travelers. 30 years he has spent, and the last 5 years he has put into documenting much of the work that he has done. He has written a book titled All That Remains, which I think is so appropriate. A West Virginia archaeologist discoveries. And of course, that West Virginian is none other than Robert Pyle, who has been so gracious to spend this time with us. You know, much of the work, and what I find about this is so good, is not just your typical book of saying this documents this fact and that's it.
Mr. Pyle is a teacher, and it does not only document the fact, he teaches you and leads you through certain finds, how they came to pass, where he found them, and it's all documented with picture, and one picture says 1,000 words, and I forget how many pictures there are in this, but it's a lot of them. And we're going to have them available here at the chapel. I know you're going to enjoy all that remains. All that remains, and all you have to do is contact the chapel. We'll have them in hand, and feel free to write Mr. Pyle if you like after you receive the copy, and congratulate him on what a great job he has done. You know, dedication to a purpose, to document that all that remains should also be taken care of. So when you're out in whatever state and you find one of these ancient remains, protect it, take care of it. I know this is going to be educational to you, and I know that you would enjoy receiving a copy. Again, all that remains, and how precious it is that we have people with dedication to protect that does remain. Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you with us through this hour with Robert Pyle.